Well, I apologize for the stutter step for everybody, and thank you for those who have circled back to join us again. I don't know about you, but there are a lot of people who are getting Zoom fatigue, and so at least for the foreseeable future, until we can get this thing behind us, we're probably going to have at least one, maybe two more meetings this way, unless we can make some significant progress on this thing. But I sent to everybody the meeting notice that has our 4 dates on it as normal. But I also, in lieu of the map to the location, I put a way for you to register for the National SABR Day meeting for next week, which is free to SABR members, and they're asking for a donation if you have a guest that registers. But it's going to be a pretty good panel for that. So you may want to consider joining that next Saturday. It's Saturday afternoon. And then I will send out again the normal schedule again, reminders as we would normally do it. In the interim, we'll try to see what had whatever glitch we had for this particular meeting this morning, so we can avoid that. But we do have a guest with us today who's going to do our book review, Dan Taylor. And as we were saying, as folks were still circling back in, the New Orleans Pelicans had a number of players who played with the Hollywood Stars. Lenny Yoakum of blessed memory being chief among them. So without further ado, Dan, why don't you take control, and let's see if we can't learn a little bit more about the Hollywood Stars.
Well, Derby and Richard, thanks very much for this invitation, and it's really a treat to be with you. And I'm delighted you mentioned Lenny Yoakum, because a number of years ago I had the good fortune to write the autobiography of the legendary scout George Genovese, and Lenny's a guy that I went to learn about the profession, and he was just such a wonderful guy. But I want to share a couple things on how excited I am to be here and prove to you, because this is a very popular T-shirt for me in the summertime, my 52 Pelican Southern Association T-shirt. And a couple of great friends of mine, the late Paul Pettit and Gail Henley, both spent time with the Pelicans, and over the years they've regaled me with a lot of fun stories of their time in New Orleans. So New Orleans is a baseball city that I'm very excited about and enthusiastic about. But another minor league team that I've developed a great enthusiasm for is the Hollywood Stars. And that started with my book on George Genovese. George and I spent a lot of time together, and George played for Hollywood in '49 and again in '51. And I love to tell stories about it. And we would be at games, say at Dodger Stadium, and George would point something out and say, that started with Hollywood, or point another thing out and say, that's the roots of that, or the origins of that, or Gilmore Field in Hollywood. Never had any idea. I was really surprised. And a great friend of George's, who's become a great friend of mine, Artie Harris. He was Scout Artie in the movie Moneyball. Wonderful guy. Artie grew up in the shadow of Gilmore Field, the Stars ballpark. He shared a lot of fascinating stories, introduced me to some amazing people. And the next thing I know, the shirt sleeves were rolled up, and I was all in on this book that will be out March 10th, Lights, Camera, Fastball, How the Hollywood Stars Changed Baseball. And I think I'm probably like a lot of you. When I hear Hollywood Stars, if you play word association, you think celebrities, you think movie stars. And I think that's the common historical thought of the Hollywood Stars, is they were the team followed by, supported by movie stars, which is really true. But they were a lot more. They were a very innovative team. They were a pioneering team. Some of those innovations, yes.
Excuse me. For those who don't have it, if you're only seeing one screen, if you don't have two screens, Richard, maybe you could stop sharing your screen, and then as Dan talks, everyone will be able to see him.
Okay, that works.
There we go. Okay, Dan, go ahead.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks. So we think of Hollywood, the Hollywood stars, we think of celebrities and movie stars, and it's true. It was an amazing ballpark in that regard. But they were the first team to fly. While everybody else was on buses and trains, Hollywood was not just flying, but they were flying to Seattle and Portland and San Francisco and Oakland on charter flights. They outside of the Dodgers and the Giants in 1939, debuting their games on TV in September of that year. The following April, on opening day, the Hollywood Stars put a game on television, and it started something that became very controversial in LA, because after World War II, the Stars ended up doing all of their home games on television, and it was a real controversial thing within minor league baseball, but within the Coast League. And of course, in 1950, the Hollywood Stars brought to baseball a new, unique uniform with short pants. And it was the rage. There were about a dozen minor league teams that picked up on it. There were college and high school teams that jumped on it. But it was not just short pants, but the jersey was just a T-shirt, a thin T-shirt. So they did that for 2.5 years, and enough players got the strawberries and cuts on their legs while sliding to finally convince management to end the experiment. Gourmet foods, I'll get into that in a little bit, and the whole VIP experience at their ballpark. At Gilmore Field, the boxes were constructed with the celebrities in mind, and they were not just traditional baseball box seats, but they were patterned after the racetrack, Hollywood Park, and also the Hollywood Bowl Entertainment Center, where they had a backing, they had sides, and they offered the celebrities a bit of privacy. And then beneath the stands, they had a VIP lounge. And we're talking 50, 60 years before the Lakers had their celebrated VIP lounge, the Showtime Lakers, when they brought all the celebrities to the Forum. But every night, the Hollywood Stars had a live band in this VIP lounge. They had a bar, and the movie stars could come in there and mix and mingle. I remember Paul Pettit telling me that probably one of the most amazing things he ever saw when he was brought in there as a high school pitcher was the beautiful woman on the arm of the actor George Raft. That made the impression on him. And I'll touch on a couple of other innovations that they brought to the game in another minute. But where did this all come from? Who was behind this? Who was the genesis? And it was a guy that I think has probably touched every one of our lives. His name is Bob Cobb. And who was Bob Cobb? Well, Bob Cobb owned the most famous restaurant in the world, the Brown Derby in Hollywood. And he has touched our lives because he is the inventor of the famous Cobb salad. And in 1938, November 38, Bob Cobb's attorney came to him with an opportunity to buy a pretty awful ball club, the Hollywood Stars. They'd been in the area for a year, didn't draw much, didn't do very well. They were broke. And Cobb quickly jumped on the opportunity, and he had a 72-hour window to make the deal. And in a day, he had called 24 people. 20 of them were movie stars: Bing Crosby, George Raft, Barbara Stanwyck, Gene Autry. You go on and on and on. And Cecil B. DeMille, the legendary director, was the first call he made. And he had raised $200,000. They bought the club for $40,000. They put aside $100,000 for 50% of the cost to build their ballpark. Earl Gilmore, an oil man who owned the property, put up the other 50%. And then they went out to try to improve the club and buy ball players. And one of the first they bought was the legendary Babe Herman, the Brooklyn Dodger great, who was an icon in Southern California. But it all, for Cobb, his restaurant business taught him a lot about dealing with celebrities. So cleanliness was huge. Quality was everything. As he said, movie stars won't complain. They simply won't come back. So as I look at Disneyland and their effort for cleanliness, Walt Disney was a box holder of the Hollywood Stars. So I wonder if maybe that rubbed off on him a little bit there, and he took it with him to Disneyland. But quality food items were big for him. He was into he was appalled by the type of peanuts and hot dogs and buns that were sold at minor league ball games. He was adamant about the fat content he wanted in the ice cream they served. Every year they introduced something new. We're talking in the 40s. One year they were cooking donuts fresh in front of the fans, things like that came into baseball maybe 70 years later. So they were way ahead of the game in a lot of the things that he did. And of course, the movie stars were there every night. Bing Crosby, Clark Gable, Ronald Reagan, Mickey Rooney took a turn occasionally doing an inning or two on their radio broadcasts. They were there every night. And I think what was amazing about that, talking to some of the former players, was that the movie stars were as big a fans of the Hollywood players as the players were of the movie stars. And the players just couldn't get over this. There were some players, Jim Baxis, their third baseman on the 49 championship team, who dated movie stars. But some of the stars, Jimmy Stewart frequently had Chuck Stevens, the first baseman, and his wife in their home. So there were great relationships. Bob Cobb's first wife was the actress Gail Patrick, and she remained an investor in the team and a season ticket holder. And with a later husband, the agent Cornwell Jackson, they lived in a big estate, and every Monday was travel day in the Coast League back then. And if the stars were at home and the players had an off day, well, she would throw a big barbecue for the players and their families, on the grounds of her estate. So there were these great relationships, whether golfing or dining or just hanging out, that the players had with these celebrities. And of course, it presented opportunities in movies. There are a number of baseball themed movies where Hollywood players got roles as extras. And a couple of fun stories. Babe Herman was one of the coaches of Gary Cooper in Pride of the Yankees. And there's been a long story out there. I think Kevin Costner put it out there on an MLB channel interview that said that Gary Cooper was a terrible athlete, and they had a hard time trying to make him believable in that movie. And Kevin Costner and others have said, well, what they did was they flipped the film to make Cooper look like he was a left-handed hitter because he was a natural right-hander. That's not true. Babe Herman did all the hitting scenes, and they shot it from a long ways away, so baseball fans wouldn't recognize that it was Babe Herman. But Herman did some of the coaching, and Herman did the batting scenes in that film. And Irv Noren told me a fun story that he and several stars were in a particular movie, and they were end of the day, it was the last scene they were going to shoot. It was the last scene these players were going to be involved with, and it involved Noren out in center field fielding a ball and making a throw to third base. Well, Noren had figured out how the industry worked, so he intentionally airmailed the throw a mile over the third baseman's head, so they would have to come back the next day to reshoot it, and everybody would get an extra day's pay. When television came about, the Stars players in the 50s were very involved on various game shows and in TV programs. They had baseball scenes written into shows, and they would use the Hollywood Stars player. Of course, the most famous Southern California ball player turned actor might have been Chuck Connors, but he was an angel. But everybody remembers him as a Southern California ball player. A couple of things that you see every day today that I never knew, and I think are fascinating to realize emanated with Hollywood. And one of the biggest things they brought to baseball we see is the intermission in the fifth inning, where the grounds crew comes out. And where that came from is in 1950, Hollywood had a pitcher named Jack Salveson, and he was at the end of his career. He'd been in the big leagues with the Giants. He liked to work fast. And on the nights that he worked, the Hollywood games would finish 20 and sometimes 30 minutes sooner than any other game. So the team lost money at the concession stands. And Bob Cobb was trying to brainstorm how to combat that. And they came up with the idea to create a 10-minute intermission in the game in which the grounds crew would come out and groom the field. And the Coast League turned them down. Minor League Baseball turned them down. They finally got the Rules Committee to agree to let them experiment with it. And by the time the 51 season came around, almost everybody in the game was doing it. And it's been a fixture in the game ever since. And then the last thing that we see today that I think most people, I was surprised to find out that it came from Hollywood. In the early 50s, Bob Cobb was trying to find a place. He was under pressure because his lease on Gilmore Field was going to expire at the end of the 57 season. He was looking for a place to build a new ballpark. And he was invited to go up to the police academy up in the hills there in Southern California in Chavez Ravine. And when he went up there, he got walking around and he took a friend up there a couple of days later, and he said, this is the place. This is the perfect place for a ballpark. And he engaged a top architect in Southern California, Stiles Clemens, and they designed this state-of-the-art ballpark for 1951. And it had what they called at the time cabanas, which we know today are suites. It had 2 restaurants, which ballparks didn't have back then, escalators from the parking lots up to the box offices. It was ultra modern in every way. And he designed it as a 20,000 seat park with an expansion factor that could take it up to 45 or 50 if a major league team came in. Of course, at that time, the Coast League was really on a campaign to get major league status. which was another reason why Cobb wanted to get this new state-of-the-art ballpark to help that. Well, when he made his presentation to the city, next thing he knows, the mayor is holding a press conference to say that we found the perfect place for a ballpark. When we get a Major League Baseball team, it's going to go in Chavez Ravine. And in 57, when Walter O'Malley made his fact-finding visit to Los Angeles, he told the city leaders that he wasn't going to meet with anybody until he had had a private meeting with Bob Cobb. And they met in O'Malley's suite at the Stadler Hilton. Cobb laid out all the drawings and the blueprints and everything that Styles Clement had produced for this ballpark. And off of that is O'Malley went to the city and said, because they had talked about, well, why can't he just go to Wrigley Field, and or we'll put him over in the Coliseum. Wrigley Field was a non-starter for O'Malley. Coliseum, he saw it as a short-term, not a long-term solution. And he said, no, I want to be in Chavez Ravine, and Cobb was very enthusiastic. Cobb helped him a lot, although it's interesting because Cobb's grandson told me, and he really hasn't been able to pin it down, but he said his grandmother always said there's two words you do not speak in the Cobb household: Walter O'Malley. And the grandson said, I think it was just because the Dodgers came in and forced the Hollywood Stars out. They sold the ball club, moved to Salt Lake City, and the great times ended. But Cobb had season tickets for the Dodgers. He was a lot more loyal when Gene Autry's Angels came up, because Autry had been an investor with the Stars, and Fred Haney had managed the Stars and became the first general manager of the Angels. So he was a lot more loyal to the Angels, but he had box seats at both facilities. A couple of real quick in closing, couple of pieces of trivia. Does anybody tell me who the chairman of the board of directors of the Hollywood Stars was in 1957, their final season? Branch Rickey. And you mentioned a lot of players back and forth. Well, the last 5 years of their life, the Hollywood Stars were connected to the Pirates. So they had that kind of a shuttle system between New Orleans and Hollywood. A number of players played for both clubs. Branch Rickey spent a lot of time and developed a great friendship with Cobb. They hunted and fished together and became great friends. And Cobb they voted Rickey to be the chairman of the board, which turned out to be the final season. And then Tommy Lasorda's connection to the Hollywood Stars. Anybody have a thought on that? Or have heard that history?
Pitching coach?
Well, the Stars and the LA Angels were fierce rivals. And players who played for both have said that the Giant Dodger rivalry had nothing on the Stars-Angels rivalry. And there was a particular game, it's out there, it's a piece of baseball history where it was the brawl on the field was so intense that the police chief of LA was watching the game at home on television, and he got on the phone and dispatched the riot squad out to the ballpark to break it up. In the final meeting ever between the Hollywood Stars and the Los Angeles Angels, Tommy Lasorda was pitching for the Angels. And Tommy threw a couple high and tight at the head of Spook Jacobs, the second baseman of the Hollywood Stars. And so Jacobs pushed a bunt up the first base line, and Lasorda went over and he didn't make any attempt to field the ball. He just stood there waiting for Jacobs, and Tommy Lasorda instigated the final brawl in the history of the Angels Hollywood Stars rivalry. So a little bit more there about the Hollywood Stars. It was a lot of fun to research it, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. And I'm certainly open, based on time, if there's time for it, to field any questions.
This isn't a question, but you mentioned about they wore short pants. Well, two things you said kind of tie together. When I was a teenager in the 50s, the Mobile Bears wore short pants.
That's right.
And I used to see them play at the old Pelican Stadium. And then you ended up, and I believe Spook Jacobs was on that team. So two of the things you said tied together for me.
Yeah, Mobile was, I think, the second team that jumped on that. And Rickey said he liked the idea and was going to give thought to having all the Dodger farm teams do it. I think Mobile was maybe the only one that did that particular year. Well, guys, thank you very much. It's a treat to be with you. And
can I ask a question?
Yes, absolutely.
Sorry, I have you had mentioned that they had musicians playing in the suites.
underneath the stands. They had a VIP
Oh,
area.
that's what it was.
So they
He
had a band.
happened,
But they would utilize these Hollywood guys. They'd come out and do an Abbott and Costello would come out before the game and do a routine at home plate. They would have bands and orchestras. I'm trying to, off the top of my head, think of the name of Rudy Valley would bring his band out and play at the ballpark from time to time.
no, that's what I was going to ask, is if you knew who was down there playing.
Yeah, down
That's-
below there was a particular guy, and I can't think of the name off the top of my head, but there was a particular guy with an orchestra who was very involved with them. Played at rallies that they had when the team would leave the airport. Played at their awards banquets.
Cool.
And I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of his name. Darn it!
That's
Oh, well.
all good. Yeah, thanks, man.
You bet.
What was their average attendance with all of these promotions?
You know, coming out of the war, they were drawing 500,000-600,000 a year. Toward their latter 3 or 4 years, they didn't draw as well, and I think there were a lot of reasons thrown out. They were often accused of, and Cobb had a very progressive idea on television. You know, most of baseball felt that's a cardinal sin to televise home games. You're going to kill your gate. And Cobb said, no, we're going to build new fans. People are going to see us and want to come out because LA's constantly growing and people haven't been exposed to us, and it's advertising. So a lot of people wondered in the latter stages, 55, 56, 57, when the attendance dropped, to 200,000 a year. If it wasn't television, and I'm not so sure it just wasn't television in general, not just baseball on television, but people staying home to watch television.
Yeah.
I mentioned Paul Pettit. There was a game early in his time with Hollywood. Trying to remember if it was 53 or 54 when it was early in the season and he made his first start. And of course, he was big in Southern California, being from down there. And they couldn't figure out. They had promoted it heavily, and they only had a crowd of about 1,100 fans, and they couldn't understand why. And then a few days later, they found out that more people stayed home and watched that game than watched Milton Berle, which was the biggest show on television. Well, thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you. And
Thanks for
That
reaching
was
out
very
and
interesting.
reaching
You
out
bet.
to share with
Dan,
us.
when does the
Appreciate it.
book comes out in March?
March 10th, it'll be out. It's up there on the internet, on Amazon and Barnes & Noble for pre-order now. And Roman and Littlefield is the publisher. They've got it on their site as well.
Wonderful.
Nice.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Good
Dan.
job.
You bet.
Thank you. Look forward to it. All right, Richard, I think you have an article that you wanted to go over about Dutch.
Yeah. Yeah, there one of the players from New Orleans, major league players from New Orleans that doesn't get a whole lot of press or is not very well known is a guy named Louis Dutch Leggett. And I did looked at his career and had written up a piece for the Crescent City Sports website. And it turns out he was very instrumental in getting the NORD, or New Orleans Recreational Department system established in New Orleans in the late 1940s. So he had played at Warren Easton High School. He was both a football and baseball player, an all-state performer in each of those. But he wound up going to dental school in Memphis, Tennessee, University of Tennessee in Memphis, and got his dentist. Spent the years to do that, but all the time he still played in some of the semi-pro leagues in South Louisiana, particularly Meat was one of the teams that I saw that he played with. So he wound up finishing dental school, came to New Orleans, set up his practice on Frenchman Street in New Orleans. But I guess still had an itch for the baseball, and so he was signed and played his first couple of seasons at like 1926, 1927 in the South Atlantic League. And then he was acquired by the Chicago Cubs, who assigned him to Reading in the International League. So he made a pretty big jump, and he actually had a really good season that year with 11 home runs, batted .342, and actually made the All-Star team as a catcher. probably his biggest claim to fame is that he was involved in the trade with the Chicago Cubs and the Boston Braves that sent Rogers Hornsby to the Cubs. So he was one of, I think, 6 or 7 players and about $200,000 in cash that resulted in Hornsby going to the Cubs. He made his major league debut with the Braves in 1929. He appeared in 39 games as a backup catcher, and he only hit 160. So he floundered around kind of in the minors. Then the Red Sox bought him in 1933, where he then saw his first year with them was like eight games. So he didn't play a whole lot in the majors. And then in 1934, he was with the team the entire season and still only played 19 games because they had Rick Farrell was the all-star catcher there. So he finished his career in 1937. So he had his dentistry practice to fall back on. So he did. He came back to New Orleans. He was, he had continued to do his dentistry work in the off season. So he was kind of well known in the city already. But then he got involved in setting up the NORD program in 1947 as the chairman of the baseball portion of that. And initially, they started out with 50 teams, and I found in the Times-Picayune by 1964 they had 500 teams, involving over 5,000 players. And at the time, it was kind of a model for a number of the other metropolitan areas in the United States to set up similar programs. So they were kind of the envy of the nation at that point. So he continued with in NORD until the mid 70s. He got ill and forced him to retire from that. He's a member of the Diamond Club in New Orleans and the New Orleans Sports Hall of Fame. And then he died in 1988 at age 86. So he's a very accomplished guy, just not big. His major league career wasn't all that great, but certainly was recognized here in New Orleans for his contributions, both as an athlete and a dentist and a involvement in the NORD program. So that was it. Just piece of information you can log put in the back of your mind at some point you might actually use.
Well, if you look back on the opening day for NORD, there were parades that occupied Canal Street from one end almost to the other. Of course, New Orleans, everything we like a parade, right?
Right.
And why not? We're going to miss them this year. But it was a huge undertaking for NORD to do that.
Well, he would go every year. He would go around to all the different facilities and like a tour, and he would bring along the city officials who, of course, had to fund NORD. But then he would also bring some of the major league players who still lived in the New Orleans area to go with him on these. It's kind of like a press tour, and he would drum up business for their department. And then he actually recruited some of the former players as coaches, specifically Oyster Joe Martina and Bats D'Antonio were coaches that he had enlisted to help with the program. So, but he had a bit of showmanship in there, but he knew he was trying to sell to the city officials to keep it funded.
Sure. Well,
I played NORD baseball from age 10 through age 16 out at City Park.
Yeah.
And that's when I had my big claim to fame of I pitched to Rusty Staub and got him out.
There you go.
Long sacrifice fly there on Marconi and Harrison, where it was like the polo grounds, and the center fielder was in the next zip code, and he hit a long fly. I was mop-up duty, taking one for the team. And then 16 was the limit. I think they didn't go past then. Then you had things like the Babe Ruth League, I don't think was in the city at that time. That was in the 50s.
Right. That's cool. All right. That's it for me, Derby.
Well, thinking of local players, with the events this weekend, losing Hank Aaron, the first player who congratulated Hank Aaron on home run number 715 was not the two knuckleheads who cornered him around the shortstop there. I'm talking about the first player who actually congratulated him was his third base coach, was Connie Ryan.
Hey, Ryan, yeah. I wrote a piece for Crescent City that got posted yesterday about Hank Aaron and his connection to New Orleans. He actually hit home runs in back-to-back games. And here's the story. It was in 1974. They played an exhibition game against the Baltimore Orioles in Kirsch-Rooney Park. Of course, that was the year he had finished the previous season with 713 home runs. So everybody was anxious to see him. So he got his warm up in New Orleans. One of his warm ups was he had a home run against the Orioles, and he had struck out and walked in the first two at bats. And everybody thought, well, they're going to take him out. We're not going to get to see him play. It was threatening to rain, so people were starting to leave and whatever. And in the eighth inning, he smacked a big one over. They said left field, went into the parking lots over there. Then the second one was actually 10 years later in 1984. He played in a old timers game they had at the Superdome. I don't know if y'all remember that. It was the Americans versus the Nationals. And he, in the first inning, Bob Feller was pitching, and Willie Mays had just hit a single, and he hit a home run in his first at bat. So that was the back-to-back games. So he had a New Orleans connection too.
Wonderful.
I got to see him play the Orioles again at Rickwood Field in Birmingham. They were breaking spring training and going north, and they would, the Braves would come on their way to Atlanta and do that. And so I thought, look, I didn't know the history. I was a tiny little kid. I didn't know the history of Rickwood Field, but that was certainly special to get to see him play in, such a famous, the oldest park in the country and a famous Negro League park and all that. So.
Well, I got to see him play in Milwaukee when I was a kid. My dad had taken us, up to Chicago to see his old Air Force roommate who lived in Kenosha, right across the border. We saw a couple of games in Chicago, then we drove up to Milwaukee, and they were playing the Giants there. And that was the first Heartland statue that I ever got. My dad bought it for me as a souvenir. Was Hank Aaron. If I had it today, I could probably retire. Those things are quite valuable.
Yeah.
But like all my baseball cards and everything else, mom did it in, So
That's why that stuff is so valuable. Moms and wives throwing it away.
Exactly. All righty. Anybody else have anything else? Brother Neil, I know you have a quiz for us, which is usually.
Well, I was gonna ask people what they think about the new rules that were put in during the COVID-19 influence 2020 season, like the designated hitter across the board and the runner on second base in the extra innings, and the expanded playoffs. And I was just reading an article where they had Tom Verducci and a bunch of other writers kind of like taking a poll and all giving very brief opinions on those, because I think they're about ready to finalize them here soon. They better, if they're going to get on into spring training. So, of course, those who know me, I'm very much in favor of the designated hitter. If they expand the playoffs to 8 teams, then for the last 15 years, my basic attitude towards baseball is I'll wake up on September the 1st, and if either one of my teams or both, the Cardinals and the Yankees, are in the running, I'll start paying attention. And because I came to that conclusion after the 2005 season when we beat the Houston Astros by 11 and a half games in the Central Division, but they got in as a wild card and beat us in the National League Finals and went to the World Series. So I said, why did I bother to pay, to listen to all those games and watch them and worry about in April whether our closer is gonna get the last out. I'll just stop following on September 1st. Well, if they expanded to something like 8 teams, I might not even wake up on September 1st. I might just wait and start watching the playoffs, because that's just too many. But some on that kind of poll with the sports writers were talking about they didn't like 8, but they go 6, and different numbers like that. So I wonder what people think about that.
I know
I'm
the
hearing
folks
it-
at SABR who like to count things and are all in favor of the new statistic of the guys who hit a leadoff 2-run home run, walk off. That new rule has spawned that.
What I'm hearing is that Major League Baseball is suggesting a 14-team playoff where the best record in each league gets a bye in the first round, and that's what their preference is. But
Talk about 7 in each league, or 7 teams in each league make the playoffs.
yes.
Well, the NFL, of course, just increased the number of playoff teams by 1 and cut down on. That's why the Saints didn't get a bye in the first round. I read an article by a lengthy interview with Buck Showalter in Baseball Digest, and you would think of him as a traditionalist. So they asked him about those. And when it came to the designated hitter, he said, I don't care which one, just make it the same for both, because he managed in both leagues. And so he just thought it ought to be the same, whichever way you're going to do it.
I didn't mind the designated hitter as much as I thought I would. But I also, the team that I watch most of the games is the Cardinals, and their offense is terrible. So having that extra hitter helped them. But the one that really probably bothered me the most was the 7-inning double headers. And that was mainly just because baseball is always 9 innings. You put a game on, you know what inning it's in, you kind of know where they're at with the flow of the game. But when you started mixing in those somewhat randomly placed 7-inning doubleheaders, I started to never really know how many innings were in a game that I was watching. And
that used to be historically. That used to be the pattern was 7-inning games, doubleheader.
When
Not
did they
in the
do
majors,
that?
though, huh? In the minors,
Oh, yeah.
maybe.
Yeah, they would do it for back in the 30s and 40s if you had travel schedules.
Okay.
You would see that, but
I've
Get
seen
the
it
train.
I've seen it at when the Zephyrs would play. I've seen them do it before. They do that in AAA, don't they do that now still?
yep.
Okay, I was gonna say I think I've seen one there, but it was just too weird. That was the only one that was really messed with me.
Well, the Zephyrs don't, but other minor league teams
They did.
in cities that have baseball other than New Orleans.
Well, if you go back, when they go back to regular scheduling, and hopefully with the pandemic getting under control, they don't expect they will be going back to 2019 when you hardly ever had a doubleheader. And if you did have a doubleheader, it was day night because they didn't want to lose revenue. So it's probably a moot point.
I hope, man.
I don't think they're even going to bother with that because they figure we won't have the special circumstances of COVID-19, whereas the 10th inning thing, the extra inning thing, that's all part of the overall try to speed up what they call the pace of play.
They won't put in a pitch clock.
The number of teams in the playoff is something also that's ongoing. So I think that one was just viewed probably. They didn't even have that in the poll that I was telling you about.
Oh, good.
That I read. Because
okay,
I don't think they consider that, that was just a special rule for that special season and nothing that will really need to be adjusted going into regular season, if you can call this coming season regular.
Hopefully. Did anybody watch baseball this year? I didn't get to see y'all in October. Did any of y'all pay attention to that season this year?
I
I did.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah, I did
I
too.
tried Korean baseball, but you know, when Kia and Samsung are the only words that you can recognize, it made it a little bit different, you know. It's same thing. They're trying Australian baseball now. You'll see it from time to time, and it not quite the same.
Yeah, it's nice to know the story.
Yeah. The thing I feel, you know, New Orleans having lost baseball, minor league baseball, is upsetting to me, but it was the third sport in this city. I feel sorry for the realignment of minor league baseball. That's Chattanooga has no baseball for the first time since the 19th century. You know, those sorts of things, that those communities where baseball is a primary sport, I feel very, very sorry for them.
Well,
Do you think
if it's any
permanent
consolation,
for us, Darby? Do you think it's permanent that we will never get a team, or not in the foreseeable future?
You know, we had Mr. Benson, who, even though as a good Catholic he was taught to forgive, never did forgive the organization for trumping him on the Zephyrs, and so he never came back to the table about trying to support a team. It's going to take that level of finance to do it. You're not going to, you know, I know Walt Leger's got a group of guys together and he's thinking about trying to do it, but you need real deep pockets to be able to do this at AAA level.
Kenny Trahan told me that there was a group of people trying to get one reestablished here, but I don't know where they stand with that right now.
Well, he says they have an ownership group. Yeah, you got an ownership group, but does the ownership group have deep pockets? And, you know, because the facility itself needs just a couple $1 million worth of cosmetic stuff. It's mostly stuff underneath the training facilities and clubhouses and stuff like that. The field itself is fine. The amenities are fine. We can certainly do things with food and beverage that would make it, you know, acceptable to fans. It's just that it's a difficult proposition in New Orleans, where everybody is so heavily football and so heavily basketball. To get them to that number of games is a difficult financial proposition.
If it's any consolation, Wichita got a AA team, not a AAA team.
Well, yeah,
they transferred over.
Yeah, and I talked to Tim, and he's not excited about it, but you know, that's what you got.
Louisiana
Who's replacing the baby cakes?
Who?
Who's replacing us in AAA?
The what?
Well, we transferred to Wichita. Was intended to be AAA, but after the restructuring, they were assigned a AA classification.
So who in effect became our replacement in AAA? Or did they cut down the number of teams?
No, two independent league clubs have bought their way in. The Sugarland Skeeters were purchased by the Houston Astros. They were previously an independent club, so now they're in affiliated ball. They paid $20 million to be able to come into the affiliated baseball. And then the St. Paul Saints, also same thing. They bought their way in. So here in Fresno, we've been AAA Coast League with the Zephyrs and the Baby Cakes for 25, 30 years. And now we're low A ball in the California League. California League was high A, and for some strange reason, they've cut it down to low A. And then the Northwest League, which was a short season rookie league, is a high A league now. So go figure. Makes no sense.
That's been by design. The owners wanted to control their farm system. And so that contraction was by design all along. And as much as everybody said, no, you know, if you contract, it's going to raise the value of a franchise. Well, it's not going to happen, and it didn't. And now you have the results of that, and it's unfortunate.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
think Louisiana is one of only, I think, 6 or 8 states that doesn't have professional baseball.
Whoops.
We used to have an entire league in this state, I think,
Yeah, the
Oh, yeah.
Mandolin League, right?
Angeline League.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, you know, Shreveport has a huge interest in it, but their only facility is infested with endangered bats. So the ballpark can't be renovated. It can't be torn down. It can't do anything, unfortunately. So,
How ironic that a baseball stadium is infested with endangered bats.
only in Louisiana.
You know, I don't like the long-term viability of the Biloxi team over here. It hasn't really picked up. I was dubious of it succeeding. I really wish we would have gotten it, but it's just not taking hold over here. And particularly that league is very, it's been pretty volatile in movement around. They're all just looking for new stadiums. And, you know, Biloxi got the Huntsville franchise. And then Huntsville, it's a little town or a little city, something like that, kind of like Atlanta did, where they're not really in Huntsville, but they built a new stadium and got the Mobile team to move up there. Of course, now they have the, you know, y'all talk about the baby cakes. That team is now called the Rocket City Trash Pandas, which is just an abomination.
And that Mobile Stadium was very, very nice. Isn't that Hank Aaron Stadium?
Hank
Yeah.
Aaron.
It is. The other day, and you know, before he died, and I was thinking how sad it was. I think they're going to play high school games and stuff like that. I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, South Alabama played some games in it. You know, just, you know, maybe a doubleheader a year or something like that. But yeah, I don't think that's really a great stadium. It's older, and, you know, compared to what you need these days with the suites and all that kind of stuff. But it's just sitting there right now. They have Christmas tree lights still out in the parking lot. They do a big Christmas, you know, you drive through with your car radio and watch lights. That's really the biggest thing they got going on there right now.
Jeez.
Ready, Derek?
We ready for the quiz?
That's what
let's
I'm
see,
asking. Well, somebody has something else.
I was just curious if anyone, I know a couple of y'all shared your stories about Hank Aaron. I was just wanting to make sure if anybody else had any more, I would love to hear them. I talked to my dad about it a little bit, but I loved hearing the stories about going to see him and things like that. I don't know if anybody else had any little anecdotes, but that was my only thing I wanted to ask.
I have an amusing story that involves Hank Aaron. We had an elderly brother named an elderly brother who taught in Mobile for many, many years, back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and Brother Gerald. And this was in the 60s. And so he would always talk about, he'd hear a name and saying, I was teaching him. So they're watching the ball game, and the announcer says something about Hank Aaron in another game hit a home run, and Brother Gerald said, I was teaching him. I don't think so, Gerald. Not a black player in Mobile in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. But as soon as they said he was from Mobile, he jumped in and said he taught it there. But he didn't.
That's funny. Thanks, man.
So Derby, tell me how to transfer. I need to transfer control to Brother Neil here.
No,
Put
all
on
he has
my
to
end,
do,
though.
he just has to do, share his screen on
Okay.
his,
Okay, I got you.
from his machine. And we'll have a diabolical quiz.
Let me get the shared screen going here. Are you seeing that? No, it's not doing
Do
it.
you have the document opened?
Yeah, it's ready to go, but
Okay.
I'm clicking. It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
What? I
I'm
didn't
just
do that.
gonna, I'll click OK on that. And then, yeah, I think I am, because right now it's showing me, but now do you see this? No.
No, not yet. Let's
I
see.
have my other computer set up to show whatever. So what's going on here? How can I share? If worse comes to worse, I can call them out, but it would be easier for everybody to share my screen. So I did that. I clicked on share screen.
What's the message you're getting?
Host disabled participant screen sharing. And I'm clicking OK on that, but it's not making it. That's it. It doesn't go any further. Yeah, I think it's sharing my camera now. So if I open, no, but you're not seeing that. I've got another computer here that I'm looking at what you're seeing.
So Derby, do I need to do anything on this end or no?
I don't know. As far as I know, if you were as host, you could authorize it, but without seeing the screen, I couldn't tell you how to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm accustomed to this, and it usually, yeah, was that share the screen, and that's all I had to do. So, okay. Oh, I know. Google, yeah. But usually you get a let's go back.
Try that. See if now it works. Brother, I think I just changed the setting. It said allow simultaneous multiple sharing.
Okay.
Hey, the two fellows that just joined, I'm sorry. I'm so late getting you in. I wasn't paying attention to the participant list. So I apologize, James and Roderick.
You're here in time for the quiz.
Yeah.
Now I got to get Zoom back. Somehow or other I lost it.
So hey Derby, how do I stop sharing? Maybe I'm blocking him from getting it.
If you close off what you have on your screen in terms of what you
Right.
would be sharing, I can't imagine that would.
I mean, there's a setting here that says multiple participants can share simultaneously, which is clicked on, and then who can share, it says all participants. And then who can start sharing when someone else is sharing, all participants.
Yeah, I can get to that share screen where I could share stuff, so he should be able to now.
Yeah, I can see it. I see it on mine as well.
Last brother said he was trying to find Zoom again or something. Is he still here?
One of his computers is still here.
Oh, I bet you that's.
Yeah, he's still on.
While we're just sitting here, I would definitely recommend anybody that has the subscription to The Athletic to read Jason Stark's piece from, I think it was today, about Hank Aaron. You know, Jason Stark will come up with the greatest way of running through the same numbers, and he's got some great stuff in there about just how special he was. I'd highly recommend that to y'all. I went down a rabbit hole of Henry Aaron articles this morning for about an hour, and that was probably my favorite one. But if y'all have that and you haven't seen that,
one of the games that Old Timers game I was telling you about that played in New Orleans, some reporter asked Aaron after the game, says, "Well, who was better, you or Willie?" And he says, "I don't think about such things. That's for you guys to figure out. That's what you guys want to talk about, but I don't want to."
Man, isn't Willie Mays the oldest living Hall of Famer now? Didn't they say that?
I don't know.
I think after Don Newcomb or something died or somebody, I think they said Willie is the oldest one now.
He might be.
I heard a different version of that Hank Aaron answer where he said his response was, "I did everything Willie did, but my hat didn't fly off doing it."
I heard about that. I just heard that one. Where was that? Where did that come from? I just heard that within like the last 2 days.
It was in one of those articles I read yesterday about it. So
Okay, yeah, I must have just read it. Oh man, that is a good one. That is good.
Brother Neil, where are you? You still working on it? You there?
I think the computer that he had like on the side of his room is the one that's still logged in, I'm guessing. I don't know what that one's for, but let's see here. What else?
So another quote in the newspaper that day was asked Bob Feller, said, what are you doing serving up the home run ball to Hank Aaron in the first inning? He says, "Well, I threw him my best pitch." He says, "I guess I just don't have it anymore."
I read another thing this week that was just funny, just in terms of how different things were. And it was about how I think it was 3 or maybe 4 years before Stan Musial retired. Maybe the year or two before, I believe he'd become the first player to get paid $100,000 a year. And then as he was getting older, he told the Cardinals to start paying him less. Like he told them to give him a pay cut because he didn't deserve the money anymore. And then for the rest of his career, his salary went down it went from 80 to 60 to 50. And I just thought that was a hilarious example of how different things used to be. But I thought that was kind of cool. I just read about that. That just happened. The anniversary of him demanding, I don't know about demanding, but the anniversary of him giving himself a pay cut happened this week, which is why the article from back in I guess it was the early 60s, I guess it would have been. Is that right? Yeah, that just came. Yeah. The St. Louis Post-Dispatch does a pretty good job of republishing old articles whenever things come up like that. And I read it and I just thought it was cool. And it's a terrible move, for the record, terrible move. But I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah, the Mets never read that article, had they?
Well, I was looking forward to that quiz too.
Yeah, I haven't flunked anything for a long time.
Yeah, I've been working on one of those games project things for Richard, and I think it's the first time I've ever had to do all of the proper. Oh, look at this, we got it.
There we go. Well, we got his newsletter. So at least we know we can see it. There we go.
Look at this. This is awesome. All right. Mm. No. No idea. Let's see.
Sure.
Or American too, or no?
No.
Just better.
This one hurts.
So I had a 14.
Nice.
I did 11.
I also had 11, but I got a couple of those match each player with his nicknames right, and they were just complete guesses. So I don't really feel like I earned my 11. That was a good, I don't know if brother can hear, but that was a good sneaky move on the first one. I picked Justin Morneau just because I knew he was a twin. I didn't even think about it being a national leaguer who just didn't lead the league in hitting, which I know Bryce Harper has never done. And that was good. Credit for that one. $11.
Good job.
All right, guys.
Thank
Thank you, Brother Neil.
Yeah, I wish we could have gotten him to stay on to talk about his book. When is his book getting published?
Let's see. He's got a whole nother.
Can you hear it, Brother Neil?
To go here.
There you go.
Very cool.
All right. That's great. Congratulations with that.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Good luck with that. All right, folks. Anybody else have anything? Suggestions for next time? Send it by email to Richard and myself. And, absent some vaccinations and things of that sort, we'll probably have another Zoom meeting next quarter. But let's just everybody stay safe.
You're thinking we'd stay with the 4th Saturday of April? Is that it?
Yeah.
Yep. So it'll be whatever date that is.
Yeah, I'll send it around by email with everybody like we did before. But if anybody has any suggestions or questions, comments, send them on to us and we'll ignore them.
Cool.
Not really. Thanks, guys. Y'all have a great weekend. Everybody stay safe.
Take care.
See
Thank
y'all.
you.